The courtroom fell silent as the first tape was played, a voice no one expected to hear, shattering the illusion of Diddy's empire. The heavy oak doors of the Manhattan courthouse slammed shut, echoing through the cavernous room. Cameras flashed outside, but inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Sean Diddy Combs sat at the defense table, exuding the calm confidence that had become his trademark, until today. Across the room, the prosecution prepared to present a piece of evidence that would shake the foundation of a music empire. The tape, stored on a sleek USB drive, was about to reveal truths long buried beneath the glitz and glamour. Gene Deal, Diddy's former bodyguard and fixer, stood confidently as he took the witness stand. His weathered face held no signs of hesitation. The man once dismissed as a liar was about to change everything. Gene Deal's testimony began, his voice steady but carrying the weight of years spent in the shadows of fame. "I wasn't just a bodyguard," Gene confessed, "I was the one who cleaned up the messes no one else dared touch." His eyes scanned the courtroom, locking with Diddy's for a brief moment that felt like a battle. Gene's revelations hinted at a world of power plays and silence, where loyalty was currency, and fear was the price of admission. As Gene spoke, memories flooded back, dark corridors behind velvet ropes, whispered threats disguised as warnings, and the constant pressure to keep secrets. He described late-night confrontations, tense meetings in smoke-filled rooms, and the chilling reality of protecting a celebrity empire where trust was scarce. Inside that world, Gene walked a razor's edge, torn between allegiance to his boss and the gnawing guilt of the hidden truths. Suddenly, Gene's credibility began to shift in the eyes of the court. What was once dismissed as fabrication took form as undeniable testimony. Prosecutors unveiled previously unheard recordings, phone calls, intercepted conversations, where Gene's voice was clear and unfiltered. The jury leaned in, their skepticism dissolving as pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Diddy's confident facade started to crack. His legal team scrambled, whispering urgent strategies, but the damage was done. The prosecution played a series of tapes, private moments between Diddy and his inner circle that contradicted his public persona. Every word echoed like a verdict, challenging the empire's carefully curated image. The most damning tape exposed a conversation revealing manipulations, threats, and the ruthless measures taken to maintain control. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Even some jurors appeared shaken, eyes wide with disbelief. Diddy's stoic expression faltered, beads of sweat formed along his brow. The courtroom buzzed with tension. Journalists scribbled notes feverishly, legal experts whispered predictions. The defense attempted to discredit the tapes, arguing context and motive, but the impact lingered. Gene sat back, knowing the tide had turned. As the session ended, the judge called for a recess. The courtroom emptied slowly, but the weight of Gene's words and the tapes hung in the air. Outside, protesters gathered, chanting slogans demanding truth and accountability. Inside, Diddy's empire trembled, caught between loyalty and exposure. In the final moments, a shadowy figure was spotted in the courthouse lobby, watching intently. Whispers began, could more secrets still surface? The glittering parties weren't just celebrations, they were battlegrounds of power, fear, and silence. The courtroom settled into a heavy silence as Gene Deal resumed his testimony. His eyes, sharp and unwavering, scanned the room full of strangers who only knew the public face of the music industry. But Gene was about to pull back the curtain on a world where fame came at a cost few dared to speak about. Gene described the infamous secret parties hosted by Diddy, events shrouded in luxury and exclusivity, yet dripping with an undercurrent of unease. These weren't just parties, Gene said, they were arenas where control was wielded like a weapon. Guests were swept into a dazzling world where the cameras stopped rolling but the surveillance never ceased. He detailed how security was omnipresent, not just to keep order but to enforce silence. Bodyguards and private eyes moved through the crowds like shadows, watching for signs of dissent or disloyalty. The guests, often high-profile artists and celebrities, understood unspoken rules, speak less, observe more, and never cross the invisible lines. The testimony deepened as Gene exposed darker truths, the use of intimidation and drugs as tools of compliance. He recounted incidents where artists were isolated, pressured, and even threatened under the influence. The court listened, rapt, as the image of a glamorous industry began to unravel, revealing a network of manipulation. Legal representatives questioned Gene aggressively, attempting to undermine his credibility. Yet, his detailed recollections of non-disclosure agreements, NDAs, that silenced victims rang true. Behind closed doors, these agreements became shackles, binding artists to silence, preventing them from speaking out against abuses. Gene told the harrowing story of one artist, talented but vulnerable, who faced isolation and threats after refusing to comply with the unspoken demands. The courtroom held its breath as the artist's ordeal unfolded, a microcosm of a systemic problem. Murmurs spread among jurors and attendees, the emotional weight settling in. Gene's words painted a vivid picture of power wielded mercilessly behind velvet ropes. By the session's end, the jury was left to grapple with the human cost of fame and silence within Diddy's empire. The public's hunger for justice, fueled by the testimony, intensified outside the courthouse walls. Just as the courtroom prepared to adjourn, a new piece of evidence surfaced, a hidden recording promising to reveal even more shocking truths. In the heart of the empire, family and business blurred in ways no outsider could imagine. The courtroom hummed with anticipation as Gene Deal prepared to unveil another layer of the story, one that intertwined the personal with the professional, loyalty with betrayal. Gene began describing Janice Combs, Diddy's formidable mother, whose influence extended far beyond family dinners. She ran things behind the scenes, Gene said, voice low but firm. Her presence commanded respect, and fear. Janice was more than a matriarch, she was a power broker weaving family ties into the fabric of the empire. Gene recounted how family gatherings were anything but casual. Meetings and negotiations unfolded under the guise of celebrations. Decisions that shaped careers and fates were made over meals and wine. Loyalty was tested constantly, with blurred lines between kinship and business alliances. Gene confessed his own turmoil, caught between protecting Diddy and telling the truth. He described moments when his loyalty felt like a chain, binding him to secrets that weighed heavily on his conscience. Tensions escalated as Gene revealed how the pressure to conform within the family and inner circle stifled dissent. Speaking out wasn't just risky, it was seen as betrayal. His testimony revealed the delicate balance of power maintained through family bonds, and the price of breaking them. A pivotal moment emerged when Gene described a confrontation where loyalty fractured, altering the course of events within the empire. The courtroom hung on every word, sensing the gravity of the rupture. The narrative illuminated the complexity of human relationships within a high-stakes environment. The jury gained insight into the forces shaping the empire's outward strength and inner fractures. Gene's testimony closed with a poignant reflection on loyalty, truth, and the costs of both. The atmosphere in the courtroom was heavy with unspoken questions. As Gene stepped down, the prosecution revealed a new digital piece of evidence, a file with the potential to upend everything heard so far. The courtroom gasped as the digital tape began to play, raw, unfiltered chaos from inside the secret party. The tension in the Manhattan courtroom was palpable as the prosecution inserted the USB drive into the evidence reader. All eyes fixed on the large screen that flickered to life, ready to unveil moments never meant for public eyes. The hush was deafening. The polished image of the music empire was about to crack wide open. The video opened with an extravagant party scene, a lavish Beverly Hills mansion, throbbing bass, flashing lights, and a crowd dripping with celebrity glamour. But behind the sparkle was a creeping sense of unease. The camera caught glimpses of whispered arguments, furtive glances, and subtle gestures that hinted at an undercurrent of tension. As the footage unfolded, moments of conflict surfaced, raised voices over hushed threats, bodyguards moving in close to isolate certain guests, and glimpses of drug use shadowing the celebration. Artists appeared vulnerable and uncertain, their smiles masking a deeper fear. The video captured Diddy himself, not as the confident mogul the public knew, but as a man wielding control with calculated precision. He was seen issuing veiled threats, his demeanor cold and commanding. Inside the courtroom, Diddy's mask began to falter. His hands clenched tightly, eyes darting toward his legal team, desperate to halt the relentless exposure. The prosecution pressed on, unveiling a particularly disturbing interaction where an artist's career was manipulated through intimidation. That moment ignited a wave of shock. Jurors exchanged looks of disbelief, whispers fluttered through the gallery, and the air crackled with tension. The video didn't just tell a story, it indicted a system. Outside, protesters gathered, their chants a backdrop to the ongoing trial. Inside, the defense mounted a counterattack, questioning the video's authenticity and context. Though contested, the digital bombshell had shifted the narrative irreversibly. Diddy's empire was no longer untouchable. Just as the day's proceedings wrapped, an unexpected witness requested permission to testify, promising revelations that could change everything. Justice isn't blind, it's weighed down by secrets and lies. The courtroom held its breath as the new witness took the stand. A young artist, once shining brightly in the spotlight, now bearing the scars of silence and fear. Her eyes, steady but shadowed with pain, met the jury's gaze. This was no longer just a trial, it was a reckoning. She began her testimony, recounting nights filled with pressure, isolation, and the suffocating grip of non-disclosure agreements that kept her silent. I wanted to speak out, she said, voice trembling, but I was told it would destroy me. Her story unfolded, a tapestry of broken promises, subtle threats, and the cold reality of power wielded without mercy. The glamour of fame gave way to scenes of loneliness, drug-fueled manipulation, and the relentless shadow of control. She revealed how the industry's silence was enforced through fear, threats not always loud but devastating in their subtlety. A whispered warning here, a career opportunity withdrawn there, tools designed to keep the truth buried. The defense questioned her fiercely, attempting to discredit her pain and motive. Yet her testimony struck a chord, the raw honesty cutting through the courtroom's veneer. Tears streamed down her face as she recounted the darkest night, the moment she felt utterly alone, betrayed by those she trusted. Her voice broke, but the message was clear, no one was untouchable. A hush settled. The jury's faces softened, and even some skeptics felt the weight of her words. Outside, news outlets buzzed with the story, igniting conversations about justice and reform. Her testimony crystallized the human cost behind the headlines, the lives impacted by silence and fear. The courtroom was no longer just a venue for legal battles but a stage for truth. Suddenly, a confidential letter surfaced, its contents linked directly to Diddy, promising to unveil yet another layer of deception. When the empire crumbles, who truly stands to lose? The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as the trial neared its conclusion. After weeks of harrowing testimony and explosive evidence, the moment of reckoning was at hand. Diddy sat quietly, the confident facade replaced by a man burdened with the weight of his empire's exposed cracks. Both sides delivered their closing arguments, weaving narratives of power, loyalty, and justice. The prosecution painted a portrait of systemic abuse and deception, the defense spoke of redemption and complexity. Diddy rose to make his own statement, a rare glimpse into the man behind the legend. He spoke with a mixture of remorse and defiance, acknowledging mistakes but rejecting the idea that his entire legacy was defined by the trial. The courtroom wrestled with profound questions. Where does accountability end? How much of the empire was Diddy's creation, and how much was a system beyond any one man's control? Tensions peaked as jurors deliberated, the outcome uncertain. Outside, protests swelled, media frenzy intensified, and the world watched, hungry for justice. The judge called the court to order, preparing to announce the verdict. Every breath held as silence engulfed the room. The verdict revealed a complex picture, some charges upheld, others dismissed. The ruling sent ripples through the music industry, prompting calls for reform. Diddy faced consequences but also the possibility of redemption. The trial exposed not only an individual's flaws but the culture enabling abuse and silence. In a private moment, Gene Deal shared a cryptic message: the fight for truth was far from over. The curtain fell, but the story, and the quest for justice, continued beyond the courtroom walls.